Hello, I'm Patrick Sheldon, and welcome to the Committee on BEN, the Business and Employment News Network. We discuss the world through the lens of jobs, and I'm pleased to welcome our first guests, Anthony Hayden-Guest and Avram Ludwig. Anthony is an art critic and writer for ArtNet, The Daily Beast, and an author of 6 books, as well as an independent cartoonist, and as he says, a writer of rhymes. Avram is a veteran independent filmmaker and actor. He's been a producer on 24 films, including the classic Swingers and the critically lauded film Fair Game, which starred Sean Penn and Naomi Watts. He also has just finished a novel, Shooting the Sphinx, based on his experiences as a movie maker in Egypt. Now, we're going to be talking about indie filmmaking, and our guest Avram is one of the people behind one of the most beloved movies of the past generation, Swingers. It was the movie that introduced audiences to a young Vince Vaughn, and to Jon Favreau, who would go on to direct Elf and Iron Man. Your good friend Doug Liman was the director of Swingers, and since then he's created the Bourne Identity franchise. Also in that film was a young Heather Graham. You have since continued working on independent films, but you've also been involved with big-name actors and projects you believed in, like Fair Game. So I guess you've seen different sides of the business, and it's changed a lot. I read that in 2013, more than 12,000 films were submitted to the Sundance Film Festival.
I think it was 14,000.
14,000.
That was last time I was there. I think it was 14,000 films that
Amazing.
And the first time I was there, it was 1,400.
And one was actually shot on an iPhone. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about whether it's difficult to make your indie film stand out now, given the current climate.
There are too many films being made for the marketplace. And the whole market is really depressed and collapsed from the amount of filmmaking. But from the point of view of the art form, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe there's so many films that would never have been made being made now that gives people much more choice.
You're thinking, as a producer, maybe it's just hard to get attention for the films, but maybe it's good for the business overall.
Right. The supply is very crowded. The price of films has gone down quite a bit, what people get paid for them. Anyone can make them. It used to be very difficult when film was shot on film. It was very expensive, cumbersome, you needed many more people. Now, digitally, we're looking into digital cameras here in your studio. It's much easier to actually technically make a film than it used to be.
Has there been a change in the quality of the film based on this technology or upon what the market wants?
Well, I think there are a lot more bad films made because the barrier to entry, their curation, which used to have to be done by studios, now it's, anyone. Just, I'm a filmmaker. If I buy a camera, I'm a filmmaker, I can make a movie.
Does that have a chilling effect to the market overall?
Yeah, well, the distribution outlets, the distributors, when they were first dealing with independent film, and there weren't that many of them, they would pay good money for a film. And now they sit back and they wait for something they think they can make money on, but because there's so many films, they won't pay what they used to for it. They'll pay less than it costs to make the movie sometimes.
Sounds like a big gamble, doesn't it?
It is a big gamble. Maybe out of, in a given year, maybe there are 30 or 40 independent films that will make their money back. And the rest of them, it's much harder.
Can you describe what the business was like in the 1990s when you were starting out?
That was the heyday. I mean, what happened was, there have always been independent films. Even since the beginning, there were people who made movies and were not in the studio system. And the studio system sort of grew up that, there were films before that. So, but the 1990s, there was a company called Miramax. It's still around, but it was the Weinstein brothers. And they built and grew this business by just buying films rather than making them. And they would go to film festivals, buy films, and they would release 50 films a year. And they became so profitable that Disney bought them. So the studios then started trying to make independent type films, and they each started their own distribution brand that was sort of indie film, more intelligent films, things that were responding to people's aesthetic needs that were not the bigger films, but more sensitive, more higher quality kind of ideas. And then they filled that space. And so the independent film market then became more crowded. And as anything happens with an oversupply, then the price of things goes down.
For getting into the business, was it easier then in the 1990s than it is now, or maybe the other way around?
It's the other way around.
Really?
I think, when I was a kid, you had to have some sort of nepotistic connection to get into film, or you had to really try hard. Now there's just so much more filming going on. Everyone can do it. Everyone can find somebody who's doing it.
Well, let me ask you a little more about your career. What was your reaction the first time you got the script for Swingers?
I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was was going to be the great, indie sensation that became. I didn't really understand what the essence of the film was about when I first read it. But once we started making it, it became more apparent to me. And once we started showing it, then how it touched people was a surprise to me, because the film was about a young actor in LA who is trying to meet girls, and he's broken up with his girlfriend, and he in New York, and he gets all kinds of misogynistic advice from his friends about how to pick up women. And finally, he decides to ignore them and be himself, and he meets Heather Graham. So it's a story that's sort of be yourself, be true to yourself, and that was the story that was about. And it didn't really come over to me until I actually saw it with an audience.
You didn't think when you were working on it that this had any special quality to it?
No, and I never thought we would sell it for $5 million to Miramax. I mean, that was a total surprise to me.
You really can't tell when you're working on a film that's going to have that kind of an impact. You can't tell frame by frame.
No.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Because this good advice to young filmmakers, like not to worry about what it feels like when you're doing it.
No, there's no correlation between what you do when you're making a movie and what happens to it and how it turns out. It's a complete surprise.
That is learning experience. Well, when recent college and film school grads tell you they want to make films like that, what do you tell them?
I think you've got to start with a good story. Okay. You have to find out a story that's worth telling, something that's important, and put most of your energy into that first.
But with Swingers, you didn't see what was coming.
No.
Yeah. Do you believe in taking chances?
Of course.
Yeah.
You have to take chances. You have to. Nothing worth anything in life is about taking chances. About putting everything you've got into something.